Now, as the name of the video implies, this is the fourth part of a story, so if you haven't seen the first few parts, I'd highly recommend starting at part 1, and if you like it, working your way back here. I'll include a link to all previous parts in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the story. We find ourselves again on Coruscant, in a docking bay on one of the lower levels, and see a small, beaten-up old freighter docked there and being overrun by security forces and investigators. And as we watch, we see two droids haul a stretcher out with a body on it, and though it's covered by a sheet, we can just make out that the victim is wearing blue and gray Mandalorian armor. That's when we're taken a good distance away, and we're with another Mandalorian in blue and gray armor as he dwells in a dark shadowy alcove and watches the scene at the freighter. And even though his face is hidden behind his helmet, there is something about his posture that lets us know he is none too pleased. That's when we hear a voice from behind him, which causes the Mandalorian to flinch ever so slightly. "You were supposed to warn your men not to take the fallen Padawan lightly." We hear the Mandalorian let out a frustrated grunt before saying, "I did, and those fools still failed me." "Which means," the voice then continues, "you have now failed me, Rigamonti, and Kenobi has no doubt fled somewhere into the Undercity." Rigamonti gives an almost casual shrug. "I'll find him. I've been training my whole life to track and deal with Jedi." "As were your men," the voice reminds him before saying, "My apprentice will now find Kenobi, but you will still get your chance to prove your worth against Jedi." Rigamonti inclines his head, seeming interested. "How so?" The voice then says, "The boy is here on Coruscant, taking refuge in the home of a Republic senator. His part to play in all this has come to an end, and now he must be destroyed." Rigamonti snorts. "He's just a child. I saw him on Mandalore when I fired the rocket at him that killed Satine. There's nothing special about that one to worry about." The voice then says, "Fool! Do not judge him on what he is now, but rather what he will become. The boy is a great threat to our plans, and must be destroyed before he begins to reach his potential." Rigamonti then replies, slightly shaking his head, "But you said he's in the home of a Republic senator. If I go after him there, it'll accelerate our plans," the voice finishes for him, before then saying, "I am aware and prepared for that contingency." Again, Rigamonti gives a bit of a snort. "You might be, but my people aren't. I need to take this matter up with Pre Vizsla before I do anything of this nature." The voice then says, "I have already informed Vizsla of the change in plans, and he assures me your people will be ready for war, and that you and your men can handle this. Though I wonder if his confidence in you is misplaced after letting Kenobi get away." We see Rigamonti's hand ball up into a fist as he says, "My men and I will get the job done. Don't you worry about that." The voice then says, "I am not worried, but you should be. Fail me again, and nothing, not Vizsla or anything else in this galaxy, will be able to save you from my wrath." We then switch scenes and go from below Coruscant to the clouds above, where we get a shot of the outside of Padme's towering apartment building before we're inside with Dooku and Qui-Gon, who stand on opposite sides of a small table, and set on that table are a broken old Jedi holocron and some rolled up scrolls, which are, of course, the items Qui-Gon took from the secret compartment in his quarters in the Jedi Temple. And in Dooku's hands is one of those scrolls, which he has unfurled as he looks it over, slightly shaking his head and frowning as he does. "I have never before seen a language like this one," he comments. Qui-Gon nods to that. "I have been studying it since it was given to me by Satine, and have not gotten very far with it." Dooku sets down the scroll and says, "And yet you say you have learned about a means by which to retain consciousness after death." Again, Qui-Gon nods. "Shortly after it was given to me, a strange priestess appeared to me in a vision, and still comes to me from time to time when I meditate. It may sound odd, but she seems to have 5 different aspects, all representing different emotions. It tends to make her messages rather cryptic, but I still believe I'm beginning to understand them, and even make sense of the scrolls. The holocron, however, seems to be a lost cause. I'm not even sure it has anything to do with all this, or if it was just another item Satine thought appropriate to return to the Jedi." Dooku nods after listening to all that, and then says, "And what makes you think this priestess promises life after death?" Qui-Gon then says, "She has told me that there is now a great imbalance within the Force itself, that using the dark side leaves a type of stain upon it, and that stain only continues to grow and has now taken actual shape and form, taking on almost a life of its own. It has even manifested beyond the Force and exists somewhere out in the unknown regions, and continues to grow there with each passing day, as the Jedi allow the Sith to continue to go unchecked." Dooku seems to ponder all that over for a moment and says, "And how are we to deal with this growing dark side power you speak of?" Qui-Gon gives a bit of a frown and then says, "It must be destroyed within the Force itself, and hence cannot be done in life, but rather in death." Dooku gives Qui-Gon an odd look, and Qui-Gon continues, "When I am ready, and my training complete, I will become one with the Force, and retain my consciousness within it, where I will do battle against this darkness that now threatens the very Force itself." Dooku's brow raises again, and he gives a slight little grin. "How very noble of you, my old apprentice." Qui-Gon gives a little chuckle before saying, "Yes, I know how strange this all sounds, and how it defies what we thought we knew of the Force, but I do believe the words of this priestess, and I believe her intentions to be just." Dooku turns his head and looks out of the room they're talking in, and at Anakin, who is chatting with Padme in the next room over. He then says, "And what of Anakin?" Qui-Gon too looks at Anakin as he says, "I must complete his training before I can become one with the Force, for he is the chosen one. He will destroy the Sith in life, and you and I shall end them in death." Dooku looks slightly taken aback to hear that, but then stands up a bit straighter, and his face becomes even more dignified than usual as he gives a few firm, resolute nods of the head. He then says, "And what of the rest of the Jedi?" Qui-Gon looks away and gives a heavy sigh before saying, "I'm not sure what their fate will be. The priestess will not speak of it, but assured me I will not have to fight this battle alone, which I assume means there are other Jedi worthy of this. And, of course, I can only imagine you are among them, my old friend. But there must be others as well. There must be." Dooku, after a long moment of thought, then replies, "I fear that may not be the case. You know as well as I do that the Jedi have lost their way. They now do as much harm in this galaxy as good." Qui-Gon again looks at Dooku and asks, "Just what are you saying here?" Dooku lets out a tired sigh and looks down at his feet as he says, "I fear, my old friend, that it may be time for the Jedi to end." We then jump to the next room, and are now with Anakin and Padme as they sit together on a sofa. We hear Padme say, "And has it been difficult? Your Jedi training, I mean." Anakin shrugs. "It is a hard life, just like Qui-Gon warned me it would be, but it's a rewarding one. Plus, I've already seen so much of the galaxy, and most of it is so much nicer than Tatooine, and has far less sand, that's for sure." Padme then hesitantly says, "And what about your mother?" Anakin looks down for a moment, shuts his eyes tight, and then looks back up at Padme. "I still very much love my mother, and I've learned that it's okay to do so, but I've also learned that I must let her go. I take comfort in the fact that she knows I've found my place in the galaxy, and that no doubt gives her great comfort wherever she is." To that, Padme looks both surprised and impressed before saying, "You've grown so much in these few years, Anakin, and I think that..." But before Padme can finish what she's saying, there is an explosion that seems to originate at the large window in the room they're in, which sends glass and other debris hurtling towards the two of them. However, with incredible speed and seemingly without thought at the very instant it happens, Anakin springs to his feet and reaches out his hand and uses the Force to divert both the energy from the blast and all the debris away from him and Padme. When it's done, he looks down at his hand in amazement, as if he can't believe what he's just done. Padme, too, stares up at him in wonder. But before either can say anything about it, 4 Mandalorians wearing blue and gray armor fly through the gaping hole where the window once was, using jetpacks, of course. One of them, and we recognize him to be Rigamani, does not hesitate and immediately points a rifle at Anakin. But before he can fire, a green lightsaber seems to come out of nowhere and hacks off the end of the rifle, and that saber is wielded by Qui-Gon Jinn. Rigamani quickly counters by dropping the rifle and freeing two blasters from his sides and rapidly firing away at Qui-Gon as he backs away from the Jedi. And with it being at almost point-blank range, Qui-Gon struggles to deflect the bolts, and one even grazes his shoulder. That's when Qui-Gon yells at Anakin to protect the Senator, but Anakin is already a step ahead of him and has taken Padme by the arm and is pulling her out of the room, though Padme seems to be saying something about staying to help them. The three other Mandalorians then all take aim at Anakin as he tries to flee and open fire on him, but that's when Dooku quickly puts himself in between the Mandalorians and the escaping Anakin and Padme, and, with his saber that looks like little more than a blue blur, very gracefully and easily deflects all the blaster bolts, and he doesn't just randomly deflect them, but instead sends them all streaking back at one particular Mandalorian, and that Mandalorian gets pelted by almost every deflected bolt. And as the other two Mandalorians finally stop firing, realizing their shots are only hitting their comrade, that comrade doubles over and falls face first into the floor, quite clearly dead. With Anakin and Padme safely out of the room, Qui-Gon and Dooku quickly move towards each other and go back to back as the three remaining Mandalorians try to encircle them. Dooku then says over his shoulder, with a devilish little grin on his face, "Just like old times, my apprentice." And Qui-Gon can't help but give a slight smile in return. That's when we watch as Anakin and Padme make their way down a hall and into another room, and run into one member of Padme's security team who tells Anakin that he will get her to safety and that he can go back and help his friends. Anakin nods to that and ignores the protests of Padme, who is then, rather roughly, grabbed by the security officer who begins to drag her away, but Anakin is too worried about getting back into the action to even notice. And then we're back in the other room, and watch as one of the Mandalorians grabs a type of grenade from their belt and tosses it at the feet of Dooku and Qui-Gon, and when it hits the ground, it immediately detonates and gives off a blinding flash of light and a deafening burst of sound that disorients the two Jedi, but leaves the helmeted Mandalorians completely unfazed. Rigamani then brandishes some type of glowing energy whip and uses it to wrap around the ankles of Qui-Gon, and then yanks it and pulls Qui-Gon right off his feet. When Qui-Gon hits the ground, he drops his saber, and Rigamani immediately uses the whip to now snatch the saber, but as he tries to pull it back to him, Dooku turns and, with his eyes shut and still looking a good deal disoriented, swings his saber and severs the energy whip. Rigamani again tries to snatch Qui-Gon's saber with the whip, but before he can, Dooku force pulls it to himself and hands it back to Qui-Gon as he gets to his feet. We then watch as Anakin quietly creeps back into the room, unnoticed by anyone on either side of the fight, and as one of the Mandalorians again opens fire with a blaster on the two Jedi, who have still not fully recovered from the effects of the grenade, but still managed to deflect the bolts, Anakin reaches out with the Force and uses it to undo the straps that affix the Mandalorian's jetpack to his back. The Mandalorian then seems very surprised when the jetpack suddenly just slides off his back, but even more surprised when he sees Anakin stand up, stride towards him, and draw back one of his hands and unleash a strong force push that sends the Mandalorian hurtling out of the gaping hole that used to be a window. Anakin then ignites his blue saber and strides towards one of the two remaining Mandalorians, not Rigamani, but rather the one that threw the grenade which disoriented Qui-Gon and Dooku. That Mandalorian then snatches another grenade from his belt and tries to chuck it at the ground at Anakin's feet, but Anakin quickly catches it with the Force before it hits the ground and sends it hurtling back into the Mandalorian's helmeted head, and at that close range, the helmet cannot protect him from the effects, and we hear the Mandalorian scream out in pain, while Anakin, who somehow seems unaffected by the grenade, calmly strides forward and drives his saber through the disoriented Mandalorian's chest. We then see Qui-Gon and Dooku, who have mostly recovered from the effects of the first grenade and apparently prepared themselves against the effects of the second, exchange a look. Dooku then says, "Perhaps your claims about the boy are not completely unfounded." Qui-Gon only frowns and lets out a sigh before turning his attention to Rigamani, who looks at the three Jedi in turn, sees Anakin begin to head towards him, and fires up his jetpack and flies out of the building. Anakin, however, draws back his saber like he's going to throw it at the fleeing Mandalorian, but Qui-Gon quickly shouts for him to stop and let him go, and Anakin reluctantly does. Qui-Gon then immediately asks, "Where's Padme?" And Anakin tells him that she is with one of her security officers who took her somewhere safe. Qui-Gon and Dooku then exchange a knowing look, and Qui-Gon says, "We should go after her." Dooku shakes his head. "There is no time. If you are right about Anakin, and it seems you may have been. We must get him out of here and keep him safe above all else. Anakin then speaks up and wonders aloud what's going on, but neither Qui-Gon or Dooku will answer him. We then switch scenes and again find ourselves on one of the dank and dirty lower levels of Coruscant, and then we're in a shadowy alley, and sitting cross-legged with his eyes locked on a small wooden box in his lap is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And as we watch him, Obi-Wan takes hold of the box and lifts it slightly as he lowers his head until his forehead rests upon the box. We then see that there are tears streaming down his scarred face, and through his sobs we can softly hear him apologizing to Satine for failing her, and something about how he should have never left the Order, that she is dead because of him. We then hear some mocking laughter echo throughout the alley, and Obi-Wan looks up to see two Rodian thugs, both holding blasters and now standing over him. One says something in Rodian, to which the other replies in Basic that, yep, it looks like they found themselves another Death Stick junkie with nothing left in the world except for what he's got in that box, which they're now going to take. Obi-Wan quickly manages to compose himself and then says, "Please, just move along. I don't want to hurt you." The Rodians both laugh, and the one again says something in his native language, before the one that speaks Basic says, "We don't want to see anyone get hurt either. Now just give us what's in the..." The Rodian, however, never finishes what he was about to say. Instead, we see a crimson-red lightsaber burst through his chest, having been plunged through his back by an all-too-familiar-looking figure who says, "I, however, do not care if anyone gets hurt." We then watch as the familiar figure frees his saber from the first Rodian's chest, does a quick flourish with it, and then removes the head of the second one. And as the two bodies collapse to the ground in heaps before him, Obi-Wan now looks up into the face of Darth Maul. "You," Obi-Wan then says, "you were the Sith my master faced on Tatooine." And saying that seems to suddenly make Obi-Wan realize the danger he's in, and he begins to fiddle with the box in his lap. But Maul quickly points the end of his saber at Kenobi's throat and says, "That will not be necessary. I come to you on behalf of another, one who may be able to help you. Help us both, actually." Kenobi shakes his head and all but spits out the words, "I don't need help from any Sith." Maul gives a slight smile. "I am a Sith no longer, for I was betrayed by my master, and this master is the same Sith who has destroyed your life for his own agenda." Kenobi shakes his head. "Why would I believe anything you say?" Maul then deactivates his saber, attaches it to his belt, and extends a hand to Obi-Wan. "Come, meet the one I now serve, and he will explain everything to you, and he will even help you find peace, and, perhaps, meaning again." Obi-Wan looks at the extended hand with disgust, before his eyes drift down to the box. But he then says, "And who is this master of yours? Another Sith?" Maul sighs. "I told you, I am no Sith, and neither is the one I serve. He is nothing more than a member of the banking clan who knows the truth about the Republic and the dark secret of the one who now leads it." Obi-Wan can't help but look a little curious. "The one who leads it? You speak of Chancellor Palpatine." Maul snarls when he hears that name, but says nothing, and Obi-Wan continues, "Are you suggesting that Palpatine is a Sith Lord?" Obi-Wan laughs and then says, "That may be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." Maul again snarls, and as his hand drifts to the saber he had returned to his belt, we suddenly hear another voice. "That will be enough, my friend." We then see, coming down the alley, a very tall, thin figure, and as he gets closer, we see that he is of the Mun species. When he reaches them, he gives a respectful bow to Obi-Wan and waves his hand a bit at Maul, who then draws back into the shadows. The Mun then says, "Please forgive my associate and his poor manners." He then glances at the dead Rodians. "And forgive his brutality as well. My name is Higo Damask II, and I have a proposition for you." And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this part of the story and what you think will happen next. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, and next Tuesday for part 5 of the story, thanks for watching.